Hello everyone, you are on the channel Scary Story. Tonight, I'm going to tell you a story that will make you look twice at every shadow in your room. It's called Shadows on the Walls, and it's about a young woman named Clara who thought she found the perfect apartment, only to discover it came with a chilling secret. Clara had been searching for a new place for months. The city was expensive, and every apartment she saw was either too small, too dingy, or way out of her budget. Then she found it, an old Victorian building, a little worn around the edges, but with so much character. The rent was unbelievably cheap for a spacious one-bedroom on the top floor. The landlord, a quiet, elderly man named Mr. Abernathy, seemed nice enough. He handed her the keys with a strange, almost sad smile and said, "The place has history. I hope you'll be happy here." Clara didn't think much of it. Every old building has history, right? She spent the first week unpacking, painting, and making the place her own. It was a beautiful apartment, with high ceilings, ornate moldings, and a large bay window that flooded the living room with afternoon light. But as the sun went down each evening, something strange began to happen. It started subtly, a flicker in her peripheral vision, a shadow in the corner of the room that seemed just a little too dark, a little too solid. She'd turn her head and it would be gone. She blamed it on fatigue, on the old wiring of the building, on her imagination working overtime. But the occurrences became more frequent and more unsettling. One night, while watching a movie, she saw it clearly for the first time. On the blank wall opposite the sofa, a shadow began to form. It wasn't cast by any object in the room. It was long and thin, like a tall, gaunt figure. It just appeared. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She froze, her eyes locked on the wall. The shadow was still, as if watching her. She slowly reached for the lamp on the end table, her hand trembling. The moment she switched it on, flooding the room with light, the shadow vanished. She tried to rationalize it. A car's headlights passing by? A trick of the light from a neighboring window? But deep down, she knew it was something else. The feeling in the room had shifted. The air grew heavy, cold. She felt a presence, an invisible weight, pressing down on her. The next few nights were a blur of anxiety. Clara started sleeping with the lights on, but it didn't help. The shadows now seemed to play in the well-lit spaces, dancing just at the edge of her sight. They were no longer just one figure. There were more. Sometimes they looked like distorted human forms, other times like strange, unrecognizable creatures with too many limbs. They would crawl along the ceiling, stretch and shrink on the walls, their movements unnatural and jerky. They never made a sound, but their silence was more terrifying than any scream. One evening, desperate for answers, she went downstairs to talk to Mr. Abernathy. She found him in his dimly lit apartment, surrounded by stacks of old books. When she told him about the shadows, his face grew pale. He didn't seem surprised, just deeply sorrowful. "I was afraid of this," he said, his voice a low whisper. He explained that the apartment had been vacant for years before she moved in. The last tenant, a young artist, had left abruptly in the middle of the night, leaving all his belongings behind. Before him, a couple had lived there, but they broke up under mysterious and hostile circumstances. Everyone who lived in that apartment experienced the shadows. Mr. Abernathy then told her the history of the building. It was built in the late 1800s by a man named Silas Blackwood, a reclusive figure rumored to be involved in dark, esoteric practices. He lived and died in that top-floor apartment. People in the neighborhood whispered that he didn't just die, but that he had opened some kind of doorway to another place, a place of shadows, and that he himself had become one of them. "They are not just shadows, Clara," Mr. Abernathy said, his eyes wide with a fear she now understood all too well. "They are watchers, remnants, and they feed on fear." Clara's blood ran cold. She went back to her apartment, the landlord's words echoing in her mind. Feed on fear. That explained why they were getting stronger, more brazen. Her own terror was making them more real. That night, she decided she wouldn't be afraid. It was easier said than done. As darkness fell, the shadows returned, larger and more defined than ever before. One of them, the tall, gaunt figure she had first seen slowly detached itself from the wall. It wasn't just a flat silhouette anymore. It was gaining dimension, its edges becoming solid, its form turning from a two-dimensional shape into a three-dimensional being made of pure, featureless darkness. It glided silently across the room towards her. Clara's breath caught in her throat. Her every instinct screamed at her to run, to scream, to turn on every light she could find. But Mr. Abernathy's words held her in place. Feed on fear. She closed her eyes, took a deep, shaky breath, and forced herself to calm down. She focused on her breathing, on the feeling of the floor beneath her feet. She pictured a bright, warm light surrounding her, a shield of positive energy. She refused to give the shadow what it wanted. "You are not real," she whispered, her voice surprisingly steady. "You are just a shadow. You have no power over me." She opened her eyes. The figure had stopped. It was only a few feet away from her now. She could feel an intense cold radiating from it, a void that seemed to pull at the warmth in her own body. For a long moment, it just stood there, a silent black hole in the shape of a man. Then slowly, it began to recede. It flattened back against the wall, its form losing its depth, its edges blurring. It flowed back into the other shadows, and together they all seemed to shrink, fading into the corners of the room until they were gone. The oppressive atmosphere in the apartment lifted instantly. The air felt lighter, warmer. Clara knew she had won the battle, but not the war. The shadows were still there, lurking, waiting. The next day she started packing. She couldn't stay. She explained to Mr. Abernathy, who simply nodded in understanding. As she carried her last box out the door, she took one final look at the apartment. In the bright daylight, it looked beautiful and peaceful again. But she knew what lurked within its walls, waiting for the sun to set. As she closed the door behind her for the last time, she thought she saw it. A flicker of movement on the wall inside, a dark shape waving a long, thin arm, as if bidding her farewell. Or perhaps it was a warning to whoever came next. Clara never looked back. She found a new, modern, and very brightly lit apartment. But even now, years later, she sometimes finds herself staring at the walls of her room at night, watching the way the shadows play. And every time a shadow seems just a little too dark, a little too still, her heart skips a beat and she remembers the silent watchers in the apartment on the top floor. So next time you're alone in a quiet room and you see a shadow move in the corner of your eye, ask yourself, is it just a trick of the light? Or is something watching you from the walls? Thank you for listening to Scary Story. If you enjoyed this tale, don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more unsettling stories. And remember to check your walls before you turn out the lights tonight. Stay safe.